we do a test with our friends that come over, and they're not plant-based at all. And she makes these brownies, right, that are death. They're just killer brownies in the good sense. They're absolutely delicious. And they don't have any of the crap in them that,
No
create...
sugar, no chocolate, no
Well, no, they have a little bit of
cream,
chocolate in them,
no
but there's
butter.
nothing wrong with dark chocolate, a little bit of it, okay? But the basic ingredient, they're called black bean brownies. But when we tell people that they're made of black beans, afterwards, they say, no, it's not possible because this is so delicious.
Well, hi, everyone. This is Diane Gilman, formerly known as the Queen of Jeans, but now the proud host of my own podcast, Too Young to Be Old. Well, just by the title alone, you can figure out that I'm all in on longevity. But how to get there? I'm not so sure. We've got an expert today, Douglas Mulhall, who's going to tell us how our environment shapes our chances for longevity. Well, welcome again, Douglas. This is episode 2. First one was Beware, You Are What You Wear, and how we have killer closets full of chemical-laden clothing. Help. And now we're going to go to everything else in our environment. And I'm going to start by saying that where I would like to begin the discussion is being very aware of cancer rates, because I had breast cancer. And of course, this is the time of year for breast cancer awareness. What in the world is going on? Cancer rates at people 50 and below is skyrocketing. It was up 77% this year. All kinds of cancer. So let's talk about, how your environment shapes your chances or your viewpoint of longevity. Yikes. Help us out here.
Yeah, and Diane, it's really interesting because the link between environment and longevity has rarely been covered. And in fact, that's why I wrote my book about it, Discovering the Nature of Longevity, because I actually couldn't find examples of the things that I had been working with over the past years. And I want to start with a really nice example that everyone can do right now, and that is called the pinch test. And so this is the pinch test. You take the skin on the back of your hand and you hold it up for a few seconds and you let it go. And if you're young, it'll snap right back. If you're older, it'll go down more slowly. And if you're really old, sometimes it doesn't go down at all. Now, that is not the collagen in your skin that all the cosmetic companies tell you about. It's the elastic fiber in your skin. And that elastic is all through your body. It drives every move you make, every breath you take. It's in your arteries, your ligaments, and most of your organs. You can't have sex or speak or scowl or read without this elastin fiber. Now, the question is, what's the relationship between this fantastic elastic of life that I call it and aging? Well, here's the link. When elastin is damaged by environmental factors, it kickstarts the aging process because it causes chronic inflammation. And everybody has heard about chronic inflammation.
I have it in my knee. Yeah. My right knee.
Right. And like in connective tissue, in the ligaments, for example, connected to the knee, that's what lets your leg move back and forth, is the elastin fiber in those ligaments. And so in everybody over the age of 30, it becomes a real problem because your body stops making this elastin fiber. So you get a double whammy. The first one is your body stops making it, so it starts falling apart. But the second one is that all of these environmental toxins and damages to your body start to accelerate the degradation of this elastic fiber. And so that has a huge impact on our longevity and starts to explain why we actually have never been able to break through this 120-year maximum age barrier, because this elastic fiber, regardless of what we do, is falling apart in all of us and eventually causes us to turn to stone. So that's a really good example of why at the moment there is an upper limit on our longevity.
Now,
Now,
I just learned, and I read it from a credible source, that the baby boomer generation and possibly the generation right below are the only generations that even have a chance of living to 100. Everybody below that, like millennials, not even on a bet. Because obviously, the amount of pollutants that we surround ourselves with are overwhelming. And here, I'm going to say, where we were talking in the previous first episode about retail therapy and how it's very emotional to make a purchase, especially in fashion. And here to me, it's all about time. Like I can tell you, I used to sit down and love taking all day Saturday to cook a meal. I had more people in the house then. Now, being single, I get prepared meals that take 2 minutes in a microwave. Now, oh, look at these balloons. This is hysterical. Please, I have no control over my electronics at all. And that 2 minutes may be exactly what I have in between doing podcasts. We're writing a screenplay of my life. I'm up for writing 2 new books. I'm a girl who's busy. I like being busy. So recently, I'm thinking to myself, you know what? Maybe it's not a very good idea to be eating out of plastic. And it's already maybe not good enough that you're putting it into a microwave for 2 minutes. But I think we are so unaware of our environment, and convenience comes first. I stay away from super processed foods, or at least I think I do. But I have to tell you, most of my major meals are heated up in a microwave and they come in a plastic container. Yikes.
well, but Diane, let me interrupt you there. There's a big difference between prepared food and processed food. Okay, so just because you're eating prepared food doesn't mean it's unhealthy.
But in
And
plastic?
this is the groundwork is really changing here, because it is correct that a lot of the prepared food is also processed food, but it doesn't have to be that way. There
Yeah.
are more and more companies that are actually using whole foods to prepare prepared meals,
That's what
and
I
that is
go
the
for.
thing that people can look for. So I think that's a really good example. And the other thing is, they're aware of the issue of eating off of plastics, and they're starting to provide different materials that don't react with the food, and don't react with the microwave. So once again, and we talked about this in the earlier episode, it is true everything that you're saying, but it was more true many years ago than it
Yay.
is today. And so the ground is really shifting, and one of the reasons it's shifting is because a lot of the younger consumers are starting to make purchasing decisions based on the social and environmental performance of the
Yes.
companies that they're buying from. So there's a real glimmer of good news there.
The people I work with, they're all half my age, and their goals are very different. It's really true. They are a different generation. They're not as glitzy. They're not as in your face show and tell. Oh, look at my jewelry. Oh, look at my. They're much more actually experiential. If they're going to spend their money, they're going to spend it on an experience, like a great trip to an exotic location. But I am still very concerned, especially having had cancer, at seeing that the rate of cancer in all cases, all sexes, below 50 years old is skyrocketing up. And wonder what your take on that is, and how, having that information in front of us, we can then cope with it and go much healthier to kind of even that statistic out.
Right. And I think you've just stated the obvious. So, yes, the cancer rates amongst millennials are indeed skyrocketing. There's no question about it. So the question is, what do you do about it?
Yeah.
You've got to approach it from both ends. The cancer rates are skyrocketing, but so are the survival rates are improving because of technology. Now, technology is not going to fix that problem entirely, but until we get all the toxins out of our system, we have to approach it from both ends, and that is both preventing the problem in the first place by doing things that a lot of people already know about and we've talked about, eating whole prepared foods, wearing clothing that isn't toxic for your skin, and everything in between. But I want to give you this example of, yes, that is definitely to be done, but it's going to take many, many years to clean things up. And in the meantime, what can people do to help to prevent and solve the problem themselves? One of the things that you can do, for example, is to consume foods that actually help you get rid of one very large group of toxins that are called heavy metals. And I'm not talking about music. These metals, like lead and cadmium and chromium and tin, are everywhere in our environment. Hundreds of babies across the U.S. recently came down with lead poisoning because the federal regulators don't regulate heavy metals in baby food.
Yeah.
Now, so on the plus side of that, there are foods that actually help kickstart your body's own ability to remove heavy metals from your system. So, for example, cilantro, is one of them. And there's all kinds of other ones like leafy greens, broccoli. Broccoli sprouts are probably number one on the list. You can grow them at home. It doesn't take much time or trouble at all. They're delicious, and they are really great at helping your body produce the enzymes that gets rid of these heavy metals. So here's an example of where, for all the bad things that we've heard that's in food, you can actually use some of these foods to help your body get rid of this stuff. And that is a critical part of helping to prevent these types of cancers and immune problems. So that's point one. Okay, point two is, and this is one of the things that I'm directly involved in, is this elastic fiber that I was talking about earlier is crucial for not just your general health, but also for cancer, because actually elastin, degraded elastin, is one of the primary things that some cancers use as food to multiply.
Wow.
So you don't want elastin degrading in your body. But unfortunately, no matter what you do, after you reach the age of 30, your body stops producing elastin fiber and it starts falling apart in you. So amazingly, about 20 years ago, scientists at universities in Australia and the United States discovered naturally derived substances that kickstarts the body's own process for restoring this elastic fiber. And if you fast forward to today, it's taken that 20 years, but they are now entering clinical trial for very specific diseases, like, for example, stabilizing aneurysm, and repairing acne scars and repairing skin wounds. And this is the beginning of what we see as a multi-trillion dollar healthcare industry that is like nothing people have ever seen before. Because if you can restore the elastin fiber that's in your body, you can kickstart your immune system. You can do all kinds of things that just aren't possible as you get older. So that's an example of the second type of proactive thing that can be done in order to combat this onslaught of environmental problems.
Because I say that you are not going to be a huge fan of your lifespan if you do not couple it with health span. And I notice now that I'm in my late 70s, things that I could get away with before. Terrible dietary solutions to a long day, like, oh, I feel like having 8 slabs of bacon for dinner. No, Diane, you cannot do that
Yeah.
anymore. Or ordering a cheesecake and eating half of it. I mean, I know I'm a magnet for everything I shouldn't eat. And so, I think that one of the basic points I would make is you have got to have and shift an attitude of a certain amount of pride in self-discipline in order to bridge those health gaps and get into your 70s and your 80s and
Yes, but you
beyond.
don't have to suffer to do it.
Yeah.
For example, I'm on a whole food nutrition diet and have been for the past 7 years, and I don't miss any of the things that you're talking about, because in fact, a lot of these things that you're talking about, if they're prepared with whole foods, are actually can be quite good for you. So I think the number one lesson, there are literally hundreds of cookbooks out there now, including fast food cookbooks, stuff that you can prepare, really quickly at home. Plus, there's a lot more stuff available in the stores now that isn't highly processed.
Oh, yeah.
And if you put those two things together, I just want to be very clear about this, because it's really 90% psychology and 10% technology when it comes to healthy eating. The idea that people have in their heads that they have to give up their favorite tastes in order to have a healthy diet is simply nonsense. And all you need to do is scratch a little bit beneath the surface to see that that's absolutely not the case anymore.
Well, give us an example of that. Like, okay. I got DNA testing as part of a podcast, and I'm lactose intolerant. And yet, the things I truly crave all contain heavy cream or some form of dairy. I crave cheesecake. And if you put one in front of me, even if you lectured me, it's so bad, it's got tons of calories, by the time the morning was over with, I would have sliced away half the cheesecake.
Sure. Okay. So let me give you an example.
Perfect.
Okay. So first of all, the smarter half of my relationship, and I hate to call her my wife because she's actually my boss and much more than that, she's an environmental engineer, but she is an absolutely fantastic plant-based cook. And we do a test with our friends that come over, and they're not plant-based at all. And she makes these brownies, right, that are death. They're just killer brownies in the good sense. They're absolutely delicious. And they don't have any of the crap in them
no sugar, no chocolate, no.
No, they have a little bit of chocolate in them,
no butter.
But there's nothing wrong with dark chocolate, a little bit of it, okay? But the basic ingredient, they're called black bean brownies. But when we tell people that they're made of black beans, afterwards they say, no, it's not possible, because this is so delicious.
That
You
is
know?
great. And I will tell you that there was, and it was just on Google News, a guy decided to write a book about living off of the most highly processed foods. I believe that he was going to go for almost 6 months of just eating highly processed foods and then contrast the difference.
Yeah, this book's like Supersize Me,
He
and
did, yeah.
the
And
shows
by
have
the
been done as
way,
well.
he just passed away, the author of that book, at a very young age.
Yeah.
The guy that was doing the highly processed food, he didn't last a week. He gave it
No,
up. He
no, of
couldn't.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so people hear this, you know, and it doesn't matter how often they hear it. If they have it in their heads that it's just not for them, or they can't, you know, stand flipping over, the only thing I can say to you is it's not the case. You have to scratch below the surface and get away from the myths about, oh, for example, I can't do without my dairy. Well, has anyone ever tried the dairy substitutes that are out there
Yeah,
today?
they're great.
You know, the yogurt, the specialty cheeses, and, you know, all of this stuff.
That's
Now,
made from
having said
nuts.
that, you don't want to OD on the stuff. And to be clear, you can have a vegan diet that's really bad for you. You know, you
Yeah.
can have highly processed vegan foods
Yeah,
and
yeah.
all of that stuff. So, yes, there is, you know, a bit of rocket science to it.
Like potato chips are vegan, but look at how bad they are if you really look at the label. And the other
Yeah.
thing is that when you walk into a giant food store
Mhm.
in America, even some that advertise themselves as being very health oriented, the first aisle you walk down to enter that store will be all highly processed foods,
But that's a
all
good
sorts
example
of
that you gave.
chips and all sorts of dips.
But the
Yeah.
chips, uh, the air fried chips are actually a lot better for you.
Oh,
And
I'm sure.
yeah, and now they're commercially available. I mean, my wife does it at home, but you can buy this stuff in the stores. You've got to be, again, careful. It's like everything else.
Mindful, very mindful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So then we start to look at the question of why do some species, the higher species, live so much longer than we do? And in particular, there's certain species of whale and shark that have the same brain to body ratio that we do. Why do they live to be 250 or 350 years old? And the answer to that is quite fascinating. And this is one of the things that I cover in my book. And that is that the human species is actually quite young as a species. At best, we're a couple of 100,000 years old. We've evolved from other species, but our species is quite young. If you look at whales and sharks, they've been around for millions and millions of years. And what has happened, Diane, is that our immune systems were busy getting us out of trouble in the short run, battling infection, injury, and stuff like that. But in actual fact, they paid a price for that. And that was that the same immune response that gets you out of trouble in the short run, guess what? Turns against you in the long run when this elastin fiber that's inside you that we talked about earlier starts to degrade because the immune system recognizes it as an enemy. And so your immune system starts to turn on you. And that is the number one trigger for aging.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so this epigenetic effect of all of these assaults on the elastin fiber in your body is a major trigger for aging. So given that whales and sharks seem to have figured it out in an evolutionary sense, there is no reason why with our science we cannot figure out the same thing.
Yeah.
And actually, we've seen evidence of that with the scientists that I work with who have actually been able to reverse something called senescence. I mean, everyone's heard about being senile, right? But cells get senile, they get old, right? And they get stiff and they start calcifying. Well, our scientists have actually been able to reverse that process by decalcifying cells, and then those cells actually revert to their original type, back
So,
to these healthy cells. The only reason I'm saying that little bit of science is because we actually are beginning to find solutions to this problem, this chronic problem that we have of this aging of our cells and aging of our elastin fiber. So I'm actually quite optimistic that very soon we're going to start seeing people living past the 120 mark in a
okay.
healthy sense as well.
So, is there, because I wish we could go on talking about this forever, but we have to put a time cap on this. How does this relate to the average person, male or female? And can I, at 79 years old, do anything to keep my health where it's at or improve it, especially with an arthritic and very swollen knee? How can I do this through diet? I'm just an average person. I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'm going to shop for food. What is going to make my environment friendlier for me and allow me to take that trip into my 80s and my 90s? My goal is 100.
I think the science is quite clear. The number one thing that you can go do is go to a plant-based whole foods diet. Now, let me just parse those words. So plant-based means exactly what everybody thinks it means. It's plant-based rather than animal-based.
Yeah.
But whole foods means that it hasn't been through a bunch of extensive processing. So that is not only one of the best things that you can do for your body, but it's also one of the best things you can do for your environment, because plant-based foods consume a whole lot less energy, fewer pesticides, fewer toxic fertilizers.
Yeah.
So there's no other thing on the whole planet that you can do better for yourself or for the environment than a plant food, whole food based diet. That's quite
So
clear.
I'm working towards that. So, number one, for my body, intermittent fasting really works the best. But I'm also not the greatest cook in the world like your wife. And so what I can do with plant-based diet is slightly limited, but what I find is prepared meals now are much more inclusive of that. So I am trying to convert, and I'm not even going to use the word trying. I am actually successfully, let's say 4 days a week, going to plant-based diet, 3 days a week, incorporating some whole protein. Because my feeling is if you do not have your health span under control, your lifespan you've got to include a lot of pleasure with your lifespan, or
Yeah.
you're not going to find getting older
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
attractive.
Pleasure is very important. And you said the magic word is protein, because protein is actually what makes you feel full. And most people have the serious misconception that you can't get enough protein on a plant-based diet. And that is
Absolutely.
simply wrong. It's simply incorrect. There are tons and tons of plant-based foods. It doesn't matter if it's anything from soy to flax or whatever. That it's not a problem to get that protein so that you actually feel full after a meal. So the idea that protein only comes from animals is absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
It's just simply not true.
And the other thing I would say, and I'm pretty sure you're going to agree with me, but I was never somebody who gravitated towards ultra processed foods. But really, to me, and I'm just a simple girl, I'm not a scientist, I'm a fashion maven. I look at a label like Impossible Burgers as opposed to regular hamburgers. And if the label is a giant paragraph, like 3 or 4 inches high in small print
Yeah.
of chemicals
Yeah.
and flavorants that make this semi-authentic in
Yep.
taste and texture, throw it out. I mean, your body cannot keep fighting all those chemicals, and you take toxins in, and unless you're very aware, you don't flush them out enough. And I think it's honestly, in its own way, a matter of going back to basics, really and truly.
Diane, it is, but there's a big but to it. And again, this is why I wrote my book, Discovering the Nature of Longevity. It goes beyond that. I think it's really important for everybody to understand what's coming down the pipe. Yes, there is a bit of science to it, but your government isn't going to tell you this stuff.
True.
And that's why I wrote the book, is to let people know what's coming down the pipe in the next 5 to 10 years that they will really be able to benefit from. And one example of that is what I talked about, and that is restoring the elastic of life in your body. That's really, really important. So, yes, diet is crucial. There's no question about it. But we will have to look at technology for fixing the problems that the human species has saddled itself with from a genetic viewpoint, so that we can get past this 120-year healthy age barrier.
Yeah, I'm up for that. You know, a friend of mine, Iris Appell, who became the accidental icon on social media at the age of 86, lived to be almost, she was a week or two away from 103. So I'm going to give her the grace of saying she lived to 103. But I never saw Iris on any kind of a special diet. And so you wonder, are some people just programmed for that and others aren't? Was she doing something so natural that she never spoke about it, but that was part of the progression? I don't know.
It's a very individual thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and what you're talking about here is the combination of genetics and epigenetics. Epigenetics is the on-off switch for your genes. Just because you're genetically liable to something like a cancer or heart disease doesn't mean that you have to get it. It depends on what you do with your body. And if I may, that's exactly why I wrote this book, is to tell people about the genetic and epigenetic influences in their lives that they can actually control.
And that is, I don't know about everybody out there, but I think there's a big majority who would love to be on this earth longer at a healthier state than they would ever have anticipated. But I'll tell you what, people, as someone who's right below the 80-year-old mark, me, it changes a lot in your 70s, and you have to become your own best proponent for your health and your longevity. You cannot do what I and most people do, which is, burn up your 20s, your 30s, and your 40s and not get enough sleep and drink too much alcohol and be eating manufactured foods. And suddenly you've got to become your number one health advocate. And a book like this and a man like Douglas Mulhall can do that. I'm all for aging. I am the biggest proponent of living a long health span and lifespan. Oh my gosh, I could talk to you forever, Douglas. Thank you so much. We'll list your book, we'll list how to get in touch with you, your website, everything. I hate to end it on this note, and I always resented people saying phrases to me and thinking, oh, how hackneyed. But your health is your wealth, honestly.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to Too Young to Be Old podcast. The episode may be over, but the fun doesn't have to stop here. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at The Diane Gilman, or visit our website, thedianegilman.com. If you like the show, leave us a rating or a review and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. And until then, don't forget, age is just a number. Together, we'll prove that we are all too young to be old.